The scratched security badge on the hearing table carried a false name. For tense nights, Greystone Court's residents had known Darius Cole.
Across the aisle, his father watched without anger. Anger would have been easier.
The millionaire developer's son, only as their new guard.
People speak differently when they believe the owner's family isn't listening.
He entered the building expecting exaggerated complaints.
We are not asking him to speak for us.
Instead, he found elevator faults erased at exactly 2:17
Who
a.m.
verified these numbers?
and emergency warnings falsely blamed on tenants.
Every report was clean. That was the problem.
Now Darius was preparing to testify against his father's company, while the residents he deceived watched behind him.
Who sent you?
No one.
It all began the night he entered Greystone Court.
At 2:17, the warning disappeared. The fault did not.
The security badge looked too ordinary to belong in a municipal hearing. Its surface was scratched from 10 night shifts. Beneath the photograph was the name Darius Hale. Darius Cole placed it beside 3 authenticated reports. Across the aisle, Solomon Cole watched his son from among the company's lawyers. He showed no anger. Anger would have been easier. "Were you employed as a security guard at Greystone Court?" the hearing officer asked. "Yes." "Why does this badge use your mother's surname?" Darius glanced at the residents seated behind him. They had trusted Darius Hale with dates, recordings, and details they would never have given the millionaire's son. Because people speak differently when they believe the owner's family isn't listening. "What did you hear inside that building?" To answer, Darius had to return 10 days earlier, when his father handed him a report so perfect that it felt dishonest. Cole Meridian's office overlooked the harbor of Port Alder. A preserved wall from the warehouse that once occupied the site stood behind Solomon's desk. He called it a reminder of where they came from. Darius wondered whether reminders still mattered after they became decorations. Victor Shaw presented the proposed purchase of Greystone Court, a 14-story building with 86 occupied apartments. "The residents have coordinated their complaints," Victor said. "They know relocation payments increase if safety problems delay the acquisition." Darius examined the maintenance summary. It recorded 2 minor elevator interruptions in 18 months, no unresolved electrical faults, and no serious water damage. Greystone Court was 47 years old. Darius had inspected buildings less than half its age with longer repair lists. "Who verified this?" he asked. The property manager supplied the records. "Our consultant compared them with vendor reports." "Did anyone speak to the residents?" Victor's expression remained polite. "We're acquiring a property, Darius. We're not collecting family histories." The acquisition committee was divided. Darius would cast deciding vote the following Friday, his first major decision since joining the board. "Leadership requires a decision," Solomon said. "We cannot restart an investigation every time someone raises a complaint," Darius understood. Supporting the deal would prove he was ready to lead. Delaying it would confirm his father's doubts. "What if the records are incomplete?" Darius asked. "Then bring me evidence," Solomon replied. "Not suspicion." After the meeting, Darius reopened the reports. Every monthly safety export had been generated at 2:20 a.m., approved at 8 lies, and carried no unresolved alarms into the next day. Automated reports often ran overnight. Yet 18 consecutive months without one open fault seemed less like efficiency than erasure. Darius searched the building's public vendor listings. Its security contractor had posted a temporary vacancy 3 days earlier. Overnight guard, 10 shifts, immediate start. He applied under his legal name, Darius Cole Hale. He omitted only that his father's company intended to buy the building. The contractor called the next afternoon. His first shift began Monday night. Greystone Court stood between an abandoned textile warehouse and an elevated rail line. Rain had darkened its brick exterior. Warm light glowed from scattered windows above the entrance. An elderly woman in a teal cardigan waited beside the security desk. "You're the replacement," she said. "For 10 nights. Lillian Brooks, resident safety coordinator." She studied his uniform. "Who sent you?" "The security contractor." "That's who hired you." "I asked who sent you." "No one." Lillian looked toward the elevator. Its indicator showed the car resting on the 14th floor. Instead of pressing the call button, she opened the stairwell door. "The elevator isn't working," Darius asked. "It works whenever the official records need it to." Before entering the stairwell, she looked back at him. "If you plan to stay awake tonight, Mr. Hale, watch the clock." The door closed behind her. Darius sat at the desk beneath the humming lobby lights. He had 10 nights to learn what Greystone Court was hiding, and 10 days before his vote made the answer irrelevant. For the first hour, Greystone Court appeared almost peaceful. The lobby smelled of floor wax and damp wool. Passing trains made the glass doors tremble. Darius checked the visitor log, tested the emergency phone, and studied the security console. Residents returning from work chose the stairs without discussing it. No one mentioned relocation money. They asked about packages, hallway lights, and the broken west entrance. Darius answered only what he knew. Shortly after midnight, Lillian returned with tea. She looked toward the elevator. "What happens to it at night?" he asked. "You're the guard. Watch it." At 2, the elevator returned to the lobby and remained closed. The control screen showed normal operation. A green light blinked above both cars. At 2:16, a bell sounded from inside the shaft. The doors opened without being called. The carousel stopped slightly below the lobby floor, leaving a narrow rise at the threshold. Darius stepped forward but did not enter. An amber warning appeared. "Door alignment fault, car 1. Darius pressed the service lock. Nothing happened. "Don't stand between the doors," Lillian said from behind him. Darius moved to the side and called the number listed on the panel. An automated service answered, requested the building code, and placed him on hold. At exactly 2:17, the amber light disappeared. The doors closed. The car rose, returned, and reopened correctly aligned. The service representative finally answered. "I'm reporting a door alignment fault at Greystone Court," Darius said. The representative searched the address. "There are no active faults at that property. It appeared less than a minute ago." "The event is marked occupant interference," the representative said. "No technician is required." Darius looked toward Lillian. She did not appear surprised. "Who changed it?" "The property administrator." The call ended. Darius opened the event screen. At 2:16, it recorded a door alignment fault. At 2:17, a remote user changed it to occupant interference and closed it. The user's identity was hidden behind a number. He photographed both timestamps with his phone. "How often?" he asked. "Often enough that people on the upper floors plan their groceries around the stairs," Lillian answered. "Why isn't anyone reporting it?" "We report it. You just watched what happens afterward." Residents had called management, the vendor, and the city. Each complaint began as a fault and ended as misuse. Children pressing buttons, people blocking doors, furniture moved without permission. Officially, the building had no elevator problem. It had badly behaved tenants. "Do you have copies of the complaints?" Darius asked. Lillian studied him. "Why would a temporary guard need them?" "Because the local panel and the central record contradict each other." "They've contradicted each other before." "The difference is that you noticed." Darius entered the fault code, service call, and remote change into his security report. The system immediately labeled it low priority. At 3:10, a resident glanced at the elevator, asked Lillian, "Again?" and entered the stairwell. That quiet decision unsettled Darius more than anger. People did not climb stairs every night to improve a settlement. They did it because experience had taught them not to trust the elevator. During the remaining hours, Darius watched that distrust shape ordinary choices. A father carried a sleeping child down 5 flights rather than risk the car. A woman with a laundry basket waited for her neighbor so they could take the stairs together. No one performed for the new guard or demanded that he agree with them. They had built their routines around a danger the official report claimed did not exist. You expected louder people, Lillian said. Darius did not deny it. Complaints become quieter after no one answers them, she continued. That doesn't mean the problem went away. At dawn, Darius checked Cole Meridian's acquisition dashboard from his authorized board account. The building's safety summary still showed no active elevator failures and no new resident complaints. The local system said the fault had occurred. The corporate system said the night had been uneventful. Both records carried the same building identification number. Darius looked at the photographs on his phone. His father had asked for evidence. Now he had the first piece. By 9 the next morning, Darius's security report had already changed. The fault remained, but its classification now read resident consternation. His photographs proved that was not what he had submitted. The property manager replied to his question 12 minutes later. No verified mechanical failure occurred. Guards should avoid language that may create unnecessary concern amongst residents. The message did not ask what he had seen. It told him how to describe it. That afternoon, Victor called. "Your father wants the agenda finalized," Victor said. "Can I record your vote as supportive?" "Not yet. I want the unedited maintenance events, not the monthly summaries." Victor became quiet. "Since when do board members inspect elevator logs? Since the summaries stopped making sense." Victor warned that another delay would cost the deposit, then ended the call without releasing the funds. Darius arrived for his second shift before sunset. Lillian was posting notice of a resident safety meeting. "Is the new guard invited?" he asked. "The guard is. The man asking questions hasn't earned an invitation yet." At midnight, Darius requested 90 days of event history. His credentials showed safety incidents but hid administrator names. The list contained 27 elevator faults. Every fault had been reclassified as resident misuse. Most closed within 90 seconds, and 19 were altered between 2:17 and 2:18 a.m. The same administrator number appeared beside each change. 771T, Darius saved the event summary. He then tested the west entrance. Its lock failed twice, and each hardware warning changed to DO or hell open. No one had touched the door. The building was not merely losing complaints. Its systems were being taught to blame the people inside it. That distinction mattered. A broken machine could be repaired. A record designed to accuse residents could be used to discredit every warning they made afterward. At 1:30, Lillian returned from the residents' meeting. 27 elevator faults in 90 days, he told her. She paused. Account 777 closed 19 of them around the same time. And tomorrow the official number will still be 0. I need to compare your complaints with these timestamps. Why? Because one record can be dismissed as a mistake. 2 independent records showing the Saturn are evidence. Evidence for whom? Darius could not answer honestly without revealing who he was. For whoever has the authority to stop it, he said. We've spent years waiting for authority, Lillian said. Authority keeps sending new forms. She walked away. Darius wanted their trust while hiding the one fact they needed to decide whether he deserved it. 20 minutes later, Lillian returned with the safety group's old phone. You don't keep this, she said. You look while I'm standing here. Its history contained calls to management, the vendor, and the city. Darius compared them with the console. An intercom failure became resident tampering. A stalled elevator became furniture blocking the door. 6 calls made on May 2 vanished entirely from the corporate summary. The residents had not invented a pattern. They had preserved one after the official system erased it. "Who pays for the remote administrator?" Lillian asked. "I don't know yet, but you know how to find out." It was not a question. Darius used his authorized board access to inspect vendor expenses. Among the inspection fees was a monthly payment for remote data standardization at Greystone Court. The charge did not come from the building's operating budget. It came from Cole Meridian's acquisition readiness account. Account 7714 had been activated the same week. Victor began due diligence. The manipulation was not merely inherited from careless management. Someone connected to the acquisition had paid to continue it. His phone displayed Solomon's name before the first ring sounded. Darius could answer or wait until he knew who authorized the account and whether Marshall had seen the missing teen. He declined the call. For the first time in his life, Darius chose to investigate his father's company as though his surname offered no protection from what he might find. The storm reached Port Alder on Darius's 5th night. Rain drowned out the past trains. Water gathered along the curb, and residents placed towels beneath doors on the lower floors. Darius had spent 3 nights documenting faults without telling Solomon. He claimed he needed a complete record, but he was delaying the moment when evidence became a choice. At 12:38, a warning sounded beneath the security desk. Bondment Water Control, Fessire. Darius called management and reached voicemail. The maintenance vendor system said Greystone Court had no active request. Lillian came through the stairwell wearing a raincoat over her nightclothes. "The laundry room floor is wet," she said. "The drain pumps aren't running." Darius checked the panel. The water alert remained active, but both elevators showed normal operation. He followed emergency procedure, placed both elevators out of service, called the city response line, and asked Lillian to begin the residents' phone tree. She did not wait for further instruction. Residents checked every floor, helped neighbors away from leaking walls, and gathered in the upper community room. Others directed people toward the dry east stairwell. Darius had expected confusion. Instead, Lillian called apartment numbers from Semery, while neighbors reported which doors had been checked. The residents had created their own emergency system because the official one had repeatedly failed them. Darius supplied technical instructions, but the building moved safely because its people already knew how to protect one another. Darius stopped at the basement safety barrier. Water spread across the concrete, and the pump indicators were dark. At 12:51, the warning vanished from his handheld screen. The water had not vanished with it. He called the maintenance vendor again. The dispatcher said the administrator had reclassified the alert as weather-related moisture. Darius requested that the refusal to send a technician be added to the call record and obtained a reference number. At 1:04, the elevator control changed by itself. Someone was attempting to return Car 1 to service remotely. Darius canceled the command. It came again 30 seconds later. "Someone wants the elevators running," he told Lillian. "Then someone isn't standing in our basement." Darius photographed the command and called the city again. A crew arrived, kept the elevators offline, and contained the immediate hazard. Residents remained in the community room, but no one was injured. The city supervisor gave Darius a written incident number. Unlike the building's electronic record, it could not be silently reclassified by the property administrator before morning. At 2:15, Darius stood in the lobby with water dripping from his uniform. Lillian handed him a towel. "You knew which procedures management was ignoring," she said. "I'm an engineer. Security contractors are hiring structural engineers now? Darius had planned to reveal himself after organizing the evidence. Now that plan felt like another attempt to control the truth. Before he could speak, a resident approached with a phone. The screen showed Cole Meridian's annual report and a photograph of Darius beside Solomon and Victor. The resident looked from the photograph to the wet security uniform. "His name isn't Hale," she said. "He's Darius Cole." Lillian did not raise her voice. "Cole Meridian." "Yes," Darius answered. "Solomon Cole's son." "Yes." The residents near the desk silently moved away from him. "Did your father send you?" Lillian asked. "No." "Did you come because you believed us?" "I came to find out whether the complaints were exaggerated. So we were being examined while we thought you were helping. I should have told you before or after we gave you our records." "Before." Darius showed her the remote resets and the payment from Cole Meridian's acquisition account. "Does your father know?" she asked. "I don't know, and if he does?" "Then I testify to that too." Lillian gave him back the phone. "Evidence doesn't erase what you did to get it, I know." "No," she said. "You're beginning to know. Finish your shift," she said. "Do the job we believed you came here to do. After that, the residents will decide whether your truth is worth the lie that brought you inside." Darius returned to the desk alone. At 6:02, a message appeared on his phone from Solomon. "My office, 8 o'clock. Victor found your access history. The storm was moving east, but the hardest conversation of Darius's life was waiting above the harbor. Darius reached Cole Meridian at 8, wearing the same uniform from the storm. Solomon stood behind his desk. Victor held a record of every file Darius had opened. "You entered the property without informing the board," Victor said. "Then you accessed acquisition expenses." "My board credentials authorized that access." Darius showed them the basement photographs. The water failure was reclassified during the flood. Then someone tried to reactivate the elevators. "Weather alerts are commonly downgraded after remote review," Victor said. 27 elevator faults were changed to resident misuse. Account 7714 closed 19 of them around 2:17 in the morning. Cole Meridian pays for that account. Solomon turned toward Victor. "Is that true?" "The service standardizes inconsistent data," Victor said, without filtering. "Routine behavior appears to be structural failure." "A misaligned elevator is not behavior," Darius said. No one was injured. "Because residents stopped trusting the system." Solomon ordered Victor out. When the door closed, father and son remained on opposite sides of the room. "Did you authorize account 7714? Darius asked. "I authorized Victor to prepare the building for review. I did not instruct him to falsify records. Did anyone warn you about recurring faults?" Solomon found an email sent 5 months earlier by an outside engineer. Unresolved safety the sense. Greystone Court. He had forwarded it to Victor with 7 words. "Harass this before it delays the acquisition." Solomon had never opened the attachment. Victor said the complaints were duplicates and the equipment passed inspection. "So you stopped asking." "I trusted the executive responsible for the work." "You trusted the answer that protected the deal." Solomon's jaw tightened. "Do not confuse a failure of supervision with a conspiracy." The residents live with the consequence either way. Rainwater darkened Darius's uniform. Solomon stared at the badge. "Your mother would have told you that deception damages good intentions," he said. "She would have been right." "Then why did you do it?" "Because you asked me for evidence, and everyone around you controls which evidence reaches your desk." Solomon reminded him that Cole Meridian employed 400 people. Public allegations could freeze other projects before responsibility was established. "After closing, I'll repair the elevators, remove the data service, and order an independent inspection," Solomon said. The residents must be told what happened. They will receive a safe building. After we own their homes, they receive only what we choose to give. I built this company so my son would never have to beg anyone to listen, Sossaman said. Darius thought of Lillian standing beside the security desk with years of unanswered calls. Then don't ask 86 families to beg us. So Solomon returned to his desk and opened the acquisition ballot. Support the purchase. Give me 30 days. If I do nothing, take the records to the city. The hearing is in 2 days. Then request a postponement. That gives us time to repair the evidence. It gives your father time to fix his mistake. Darius looked at the preserved wall. Solomon had once lived in buildings where owners promised repairs only after collecting rent. I'm not voting for the acquisition, Darius said. If you testify, you cannot remain on the succession committee, Solomon said. Do you want me to protect the company or protect what the company was supposed to be? One righteous decision can leave other people paying its cost. People are already paying. We just don't put them in our reports. Darius removed his board access card and placed it on the desk. He kept the security badge. That one still represented a job he had not finished. At Greystone Court that evening, Lillian spoke through the partly opened basement door. The city scheduled an independent hearing for Thursday, she said. The residents will testify, so will I, as Solomon Cole's son or as the guard who lied to us. Both. She closed the door without offering forgiveness. Darius returned to the lobby desk. At 2:16, the elevator warning appeared again. This time, before account 7714 could erase it, he transmitted the live event to the city investigator assigned to the hearing. At 2:17, the local record changed to resident misuse. The copy outside the building did not. Thursday morning, Darius placed 2 identification cards on the hearing table. One identified a Cole Meridian board member. The other identified Greystone Court's temporary guard, Darius Hale. The hearing officer looked from one card to the other. Before presenting evidence, Darius said, I need to disclose how I obtained it. He disclosed the acquisition vote, his use of his mother's surname, and the information residents shared without knowing his connection. He called it deception. Cole Meridian's attorney called the evidence compromised. The investigator separated Darius's account from records collected independently by residents, vendors, and the city. Lillian placed the resident's safety phone on the table and read from its call history. March 8th, intercom failure. April 19th, stalled elevator. May 2nd, 6 calls concerning car 1. We are not asking Mr. Cole to speak for us. The hearing officer asked what the residents wanted. Repairs we can verify, records we can see, and buyers who cannot decide which complaints are allowed to exist. Darius then explained the system pattern. A fault appeared locally. At 2:17, account 7714 changed it to resident misuse. At 2:20, the acquisition system exported a report with no unresolved event. The storm record sent to the city showed a water control failure. Greystone Court's copy called the same event weather-related moisture. Both carried the same identification number and different descriptions. Darius explained that the reset did more than close a maintenance ticket. Once the description changed, consultants reviewing the acquisition saw resident behavior instead of mechanical failure. Each altered entry made the next complaint easier to dismiss. The system did not simply hide a problem. It manufactured a history in which the residents were responsible for it. Victor Shaw testified after lunch. He described account 7714 as a service that removed duplicates and false alarms. Victor's contract allowed events to be resolved based on acquisition impact, without confirmation from an on-site technician. Victor said acquisition impact meant inaccurate events that might distort property value. He could not explain how a remote administrator determined which events were inaccurate. The investigator displayed 2 commands from account 7714 attempting to reactivate the elevators during the storm. The system showed the alarm had been resolved, Victor said. Lillian's response came quietly from the resident seats. The water didn't read the system. The hearing officer asked her not to interrupt. No technical explanation improved upon her sentence. Solomon testified last. He acknowledged authorizing Victor's work and forwarding the engineer's warning without opening it. "Did you order Mr. Shaw to falsify safety records?" the hearing officer asked. "No. Did you benefit from reports that removed unresolved faults?" Solomon looked at Darius before answering. "My company did. Did your instruction create pressure to conceal the warnings?" Solomon lowered his eyes to the email. "Yes," he said. "Whether I intended it or not, the admission did not absolve him. It established that the company's failure had not begun with one dishonest account. It had begun when speed became more valuable than questions, and when Solomon allowed a convenient summary to replace a warning he had chosen not to read." There was no applause. Residents had come because the building still needed to function after everyone left. The panel paused the acquisition, preserved all data, and ordered an independent inspection. Repair money entered protected escrow. No safety event could close without verification from a technician and resident-appointed monitor. Victor was removed from Greystone Court, said decisions, while his contract underwent review. Responsibility could no longer be erased at 217. Darius withdrew from the Vote and Succession Committee. He presented neither decision as a sacrifice. They were consequences of using the residents' trust without permission. In the corridor, Solomon approached him. "You could have given me 30 days, he said. "They already gave us years." Solomon nodded. Darius resisted the urge to comfort him. Love did not require pretending that consequence was cruelty. Lillian waited near the exit with several residents. "You told the truth in there," she said. "Eventually, that does not restore what you took. I know. Trust is not repaired at a hearing. It is repaired after the important people stop watching." She handed him the temporary badge she had removed from the desk. "Why give this back?" he asked. "So you remember which job taught you to listen." Lillian left. Darius remained with the badge, carrying the wrong surname and the most honest work he had ever done. 6 months later, Greystone Court still looked like an old building. The bricks remained dark from rain. Trains still rattled the lobby windows, and the west entrance required a firm pull. Accountability had not made the property unrecognizable. It had made neglect harder to hide. A public screen now displayed every fault, its opening time, inspection, and closure. Original descriptions could not be altered. Corrections appeared beneath them with the administrator's name. Lillian became one of 3 resident monitors after confirming they could challenge closed events without management approval. "A ceremonial seat is still an empty chair," she had told them. The elevator motors were replaced. The basement pumps gained independent alarms, and the west stairwell received reliable emergency lighting. The repairs required protected money, not a millionaire's imagination. The review found that Victor repeatedly allowed acquisition concerns to influence safety records. After a formal process, Cole Meridian ended his employment. Its public sponsor acknowledged that company leadership had created the pressure behind his actions. Cole Meridian withdrew its offer. A city and resident preservation agreement prevented Greystone Court from being sold until repairs were verified. Darius did not return to his office at Cole Meridian. He joined a small cooperative inspecting aging residential buildings. Greystone Court became his assignment only after residents approved him. Lillian abstained from that vote. "I didn't vote against you," she explained when he arrived for the first inspection. That sounds almost encouraging. Don't become greedy. Trust returned through small acts. Darius arriving when promised, admitting what he did not know, and leaving every finding where residents could read it. One Tuesday evening, Solomon entered Greystone Court alone. He brought no assistant, lawyer, or prepared apology. He stood beneath the maintenance screen reading the open reports. Darius was checking a repaired door sensor when he noticed him. "Lillian said you might be here," Solomon said. "She invited you? She said I could sit in the lobby if I didn't mistake access for forgiveness." Darius almost smiled. "That sounds like her." They sat apart on a bench. Solomon said Cole Meridian had formed a resident safety committee with authority to delay acquisitions. Raw inspection data reached its members before company executives. "Will it work?" Darius asked. "I don't know yet." For once, Solomon described reform without claiming victory. "I built something no one could take from us," Solomon said. "I didn't realize I was building something no one felt safe questioning." Darius looked toward the maintenance screen. "I questioned you by lying to people who had less power than I did. You admitted it. That doesn't make it disappear." "No," Solomon said. "It makes it something you have to live differently after." The elevator chimed. The clock read 2:17 a.m. Lillian stepped from the elevator with groceries. The car stood level with the lobby floor and closed smoothly behind her. The completed test remained visible on the public screen with the technician's name and Lillian's verification. "You two planning to sit there until sunrise?" she asked. "We haven't decided," Darius said. "Then don't block the entrance while you work on it." Solomon moved his feet. Lillian passed between them and continued toward her apartment. Darius listened as the elevator carried her upward. 6 months earlier, that sound announced a fault someone erased. Now it marked an ordinary journey, preserved in a record no one controlled alone. Solomon did not ask Darius to return. Darius did not offer forgiveness on a schedule. They remained on the bench, leaving enough distance for honesty, because responsibility does not begin when the truth becomes public. It begins when people lose the power to decide which consequences deserve to be remembered. If loyalty asks you to hide the consequences of someone's choices, where should that loyalty end? Share your perspective and subscribe to Hush Stories for more original dramas about dignity, accountability, and change.